Hello, everybody. Welcome to our ISO 9001 2015 awareness series. Today, we'll be looking at the very important topic of clause 4.3, which is determining the scope of the quality management system. And now, a lot of people do not understand how to determine the scope of the quality management system. And so that is what we're going to be taking our time to explain today. Now, these are what we're going to be looking at on this course. We're going to look at the general overview of ISO, the structure, then we're going to define scope, we're going to discuss the tips for a good scope, and then we're going to talk about how to audit the scope of the quality management system. My name is Chinedu Wanyanwu. I am the co-founder of SafeBadge, and of course, I have vast experience in quality management system certification and also in training. I am an exemplar GoBus certified tutor in ISO 9001, 45,000, and 14,001. Now, at the end of all this, we will be able to understand what a scope is and how to write a good scope and how to audit a scope. Now, we all know that ISO 9001 2015 is a popular standard. As a matter of fact, it is the most popular of the ISO series, and it helps organizations to manage their customers and other relevant interested parties, thereby meeting their expectation. It also helps to manage risk. Now, it has several benefits, including minimizing mistakes, less wastage, and helps businesses to get globally recognized. Now, we all know ISO 9001 2015 uses the PDCA methodology, which is the plan, do, check, and act. It has 10 clauses, but from clause 4 to clause 10 are auditable. And today we're looking at clause 4, and specifically we're looking at clause 4.3, which talks about determining the scope of the quality management system. If you haven't been following this series, please do well to look at for other series we have done on understanding the organization and its context, understanding the needs and expectation of interested parties. But today we're discussing determining the scope of the quality management system. Now, so what is scope? Now, the clause ISO 9001 2015 in clause 4.3 states, and this is exactly what it states. It said determining the scope of the quality management system. It said the organization shall determine the boundaries and applicability of the quality management system to establish its scope. When determining the scope, the organization shall consider the internal and external issues referred to in 4.1. So we have also treated 4.1, which is context of the organization in one of our series. So do well to go and watch that video. We have also treated 4.2, which is referred here, requirements of relevant interested parties. And then you should also consider the product and services of the organization. Now, the question is, what is scope? Just like the management system says, scope defines the boundaries and applicability of the quality management system of an organization. What does this organization do? What activities do they cover? That is simply what the scope is. And it's on the basis of the scope of the quality management system that organizations are audited to see if they have met or have not met the requirements of the management system. Now, a scope helps to tell what part of the business is covered by the quality management system. And the scope is very important because the scope helps to clarify what is included and what is not included in the quality management system of an organization. It helps auditors to understand the coverage of the quality management system of an organization that they wish to audit. It also affects certification. And finally, it aligns the quality management system with actual business operations. You don't want to be carrying a scope that is vague, a scope that does not align with business operation. So by defining the scope, you clearly define what your business operations are and how they align with your quality management system, and helps us also to define compliance obligations. Now, what must be done in scope determination? Now, let's look at some of it. Now, we're referring back to the quality management system standard in the manual. And I'm going to read. It says, the organization shall apply all the requirements of this international standard if they are applicable within the determined scope of its quality management system. The scope of the organization's quality management system shall be available and maintained as documented information. And this simply says that the scope must be written down clearly and be available for people to see this written down scope. Now, it also says that the scope shall state the type of product and services covered and provide justification for any requirements of this international standard that the organization determines is not applicable to the scope of its quality management system. We're going to deal with this in details when we're looking at exclusion from the quality management system. And it also says that the conformity of the international standard may only be claimed if the requirements determined as not being applicable do not affect the organization's ability or responsibility to ensure the conformity of its products and services and the enhancement of customer satisfaction. What this simply means is that if you are excluding any part of the quality management system from your scope, you must make sure it does not affect your ability to meet your promises to your customers. You must make sure that it does not affect anything that enhances customer satisfaction. So you cannot exclude any requirement of this standard if it affects your ability to meet customer satisfaction. That is exactly what this part is saying. So we're now going to summarize all we have discussed right now. Now, if you look at the keywords, I have highlighted them here in this table. Apply all applicable clauses. It means that if it fits your operation, you must do it. Document the scope, you must write the scope down. State product and services. When we look at your scope should be able to state clearly the things that you do. Your scope must justify exclusion. Why is this not part of what we do? You must state clearly why. If you say this clause is not applicable to you, you must state why. And a very common one is clause 8.3, which is design. Many organizations that are not into design often exclude it from the management system. Now, maintain customer focus. It means that when you are excluding any part of the management system from your scope, you must make sure it does not affect your quality or satisfaction to your customers. And then you cannot claim that you have met the requirement of the standard if what you have excluded affects your ability to satisfy your customers. That's simply what the summary is. So now, what must be considered when defining the scope? Let's look at this in earnest. According to the ISO quality management system, ISO 9001, it requires that the scope must consider first internal and external issues. So once again, you can refer to what we've discussed in internal and external issues, including markets, environment, regulations, culture, employees, and the rest of them. You must consider them in defining your scope. You must consider the requirements of interested parties. Who are your interested parties? What do they want from you? Clause 4.2, we have also done a video on interested parties. You can refer to them. Then you must understand or state clearly your product and services, the product and services of this organization that is covered within the quality management system. Then you must justify any exclusion. If you're taking anything away from your quality management system, you must justify that exclusion. Now, this management system also clearly says how to define the scope. So I'm just going to explain in detail how you need to define your scope. Now, let's look at it step by step. First and foremost, you need to analyze your internal and external issues. I won't talk much about this. Refer to the video we've talked about. So do whatever you have to do to analyze your internal and external issues. Identify relevant interested parties within your organization. List your products and services that you provide. Define physical boundaries, your sites, your locations, and then clarify what is included or excluded from your quality management system. Now, write the scope down clearly in a document. Very, very important. Now, what are the tips for writing a very solid scope? Number one, be specific. Mention your size, mention departments. You must be specific when defining the scope of your quality management system. Number two, you must state what is included and what is not included. And if you are stating an exclusion, please clearly define and justify that exclusion. Number three is that you must ensure that it reflects the real quality management system coverage. Everything that you cover within your quality management system, please state it clearly there. The next thing you need to do is to align with clause 4.1, which is the context of the organization, internal and external issues, and 4.2, which is interested parties. And then finally, you must keep your scope updated as your organization evolves. What is an example of a good scope? Now look at this scope here. It states that the organization has defined the boundary and applicability of its quality management system to include all operations, covering all services areas. Now, if you look at this scope very well, you will see that it includes what the company is all about. It includes, they stated their services, which is engineering services, corrosion management, marine services, logistics, and all that. It states the department that needs to be covered. It also states that in determining this scope, they have considered their boundaries and applicability. They have considered their internal and external issues. It also states all that needs to be in the scope. And finally, it states their exclusion. It said they are not into 8.3, therefore, because they are not into designs, they have excluded 8.3. This is an example of a good scope, very brief. Okay, you can see clearly that they've stated their location and clearly where and what they do. But this is an example of a bad scope. At ABS, our scope covers all company operations. What are company operations? In defining scope, you must be very clear on what you mean by company operations. Now, let's look at where to write the scope down, because remember, the management system says that the scope must be documented. So where do you write down the scope? First of all, you write the scope down in the quality manual. Then you can state your scope in your policy. You can state your scope in a standalone statement in your quality management system documentation. And you must make sure that your scope is available to interested parties and auditors. Now, how do you evaluate the scope? Assuming you are an auditor and you want to audit the scope of a quality management system, these are the key questions you must ask. Is the scope documented? If you audit a management system for ISO 9001 and you find that the scope is not documented, that is a non-conformity, because the management system requires that scope must be documented. Number two is that you should ask questions. Does the scope reflect actual operations? You must find that there. Are there exclusions from clause 8? And are there justification provided for this exclusion? Because in clause 8, which we're going to look out in the future, it defines the operations. And because it defines operation, that is where most times exclusions come from. Does the scope consider internal and external issues? So you need to analyze the scope and see if they have considered their internal issues, they have considered their external issues, and have been able to define their ability to meet these services. Now, sometimes scope change. And if a scope change, you need to find out what can lead to those changes in scope. So what are the things that can lead to changes in scope? New products or services, changing location or sites, opening or closing of branches, changes in interested parties requirement, changes in processes or operations, adding a new process. For instance, if you were not into design, you decided to include design, changing in legal or other requirements, business expansion or diversification, discontinuation of a certain activity or product, technological changes, and of course, strategic direction. When your strategic direction changes, obviously, most likely, your scope will change. Now, it is important to note that you must review your scope at least annually or during your management review meetings to be sure that the scope is always relevant and it is still significant as regards to operations and business changes. Now, in conclusion, the scope sets the boundary for your QMS. It states what you do, how you do it, and where you are. It also defines what operations are covered in your management system. And you must know that your scope must be documented and it must reflect your operations and objectives. Now, my last words are this: a well defined scope is the foundation of an effective QMS. Now, having stated that, I want to thank you for joining this series and I hope to see you in the next series. Now, we are Safe Batch Company Limited. This is a company that is dedicated to ensuring that every business in Africa and in the world is operating safe and ensuring quality delivery. This is our vision statement, our mission statement, our core values, and our services include management system certification, training, QMS, QHSE manpower, and equipment supply, and the list goes on. And so if you want to contact us, you can reach us at www.safebatch.com, or you call any of this number, or you simply send us an email at safebatchnigltd@gmail.com. If you enjoyed this presentation, if you enjoyed this training series, please look out and watch the previous series and follow us as we are going to be following the sequence of the standard. Our next series is likely going to be on 4.4, which is processes and the interaction. See you in that series. Thank you very much for your time, and we hope to see you in our subsequent series.